I have some breaking news about this catastrophe that happened this weekend, because that's what it was. Number one, I have from sources are that very few people who were at that event, who were post standers, who were security personnel, very few were actual Secret Service agents. This is just a really stunning development. I want you to think about what I just said. The guy with probably the highest threat level on planet Earth, up there with the Pope, Obama, people with incredible name ID, everybody's going to recognize, who have big security footprints. We were out there with very, very few Secret Service post-standers. Many of them, what we used to call back in the day, OTAs, other Treasury agents, they wound up being outsourced security personnel from other agencies. Not that these aren't good people, but folks, are we serious? We don't have Secret Service agents protecting the Secret Service's, probably at this point, most threatened protectee? That is absolutely insane. I'm not sure you heard that. I said it anywhere else. I think I spoke about it a little bit on Jesse's show last night. But here's another thing I'm hearing from sources. That this subject, they had been monitoring him since he came in around that external perimeter area. The subject was the shooter. They lost track of him, apparently, and he was hiding in a building about 300 yards away. Folks, if they had this subject in their on their, say, their radar, that you had a potential threat, I think the questions right now are fairly obvious. Why was President Trump even on stage at that point? He should have not been on stage. It's ridiculous. I mean, if you know you're in a situation with a potential threat out there, just delay the event for a little bit. I mean, listen, we've got to talk candidly about this stuff. Again, I don't want to hear about Monday morning quarterbacking anything. This isn't a freaking football game, man. This is the life of the President of the United States.
Now, I want you to contrast what Dan Bongino just had to say with this breaking news from Natasha Bertrand, who happens to be the CNN correspondent covering the Pentagon and national security, a.k.a. very, very tied in. And she says, breaking exclusive, the U.S. obtained intel in recent weeks on a plot by Iran to try to assassinate Trump, a development that led to Secret Service increasing his security before Saturday's shooting. Plot has no known connection to crooks. However, more, a U.S. national security official said the Secret Service and Trump campaign were made aware of the threat before Saturday's rally. Secret Service learned of the increased threat from this threat stream, the official told CNN. NSC directly contacted United States Secret Service at a senior level to be absolutely sure they continue to track the latest reporting. Secret Service shared this information with the detail lead, and the Trump campaign was made aware of an evolving threat. In response to the increased threat, Secret Service surged resources and assets for the protection of former President Trump. All of this was in advance of Saturday. Forgive me, ladies and gentlemen, but no, none of that happened. And if you've actually paid attention to this story, and I know I am way too online, so for most of you, a lot of this is going to come as a shock. I'm going to break down all of the evidence I have as to why I think what we're being told is a lie. And there's a lot. There's a tremendous amount of evidence, not a small amount. And yes, this is early on reporting, and yes, some of this information will change, and yes, you should keep an open mind, and you should discount some of this. Basically what I'm saying is it's too early to have a firm conclusion, but it is plenty long enough into this that you can suspect that something is off deeply with what transpired here. Deeply. Now, I have my own suspicions. I might tell you what they are if I can get away with it. But at the end of the day, I want you to make up your own mind and keep an open mind as new developments come out in this, because it's evolving so rapidly. I've been just 72 hours since this happened. I have been following it nonstop. Let's start here. The head of the Secret Service is a woman named Kim Cheadle. I was not familiar with Miss Cheadle. Obviously, I don't pay much attention to the Secret Service. Why would I? But this is the head of the Secret Service that was appointed by Joe Biden. And I wanted to give you this quick little snippet as to who she is.
Who is most responsible for this happening?
What I would say is that the Secret Service is responsible for the protection of the former president.
So the buck stops with you?
The buck stops with me. I am the director of the Secret Service. It was unacceptable, and it's something that shouldn't happen again.
The President and Homeland Security Secretary said today they had 100% confidence in you, but there are some members of Congress calling on you to resign.
I appreciate the Secretary's comments, and we're going to continue to be transparent and communicate with people.
Do you plan to stay on? Absolutely.
I do plan to stay on.
Yep. So there you go. Despite the fact that she said, yeah, it was a huge mistake, but I guess I don't have to leave. Okay. Whatever you say.
She would know. The 28-year veteran was on the team that evacuated Vice President Dick Cheney on 9/11, and she served on then Vice President Biden's protective detail. He named her director in mid-2022. Amid a swirl of controversy over the agency deleting nearly all of its text messages from January 6th. The agency says that was due to a data migration.
System migrations happen, but I think for a lot of Americans, it just doesn't pass the smell test, given the timing and the volume of messages deleted.
Well, it's unfortunate that that would be the assumption that people would make. Our integrity is everything, and there was nothing nefarious attached to that.
Their integrity has been put to the test. She would know.
So, she is a 28-year veteran who actually assisted Dick Cheney into getting into the bunker during 9/11, is then the Secret Service detail for Joe Biden as vice president, is appointed by him. She's been in and around this apparatus for 25 plus years. And she's also presided over the Secret Service as their text messages were deleted after J6. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Swamp Monster. I mean, does it get swampier? Dick Cheney, Joe Biden, J6, Secret Service, assassination attempt on Trump, and she's involved with all of that somehow? She's certainly not in that position because she's good at her fucking job. So she's in there for another reason. And I assume that you can figure out my conclusion as to why, but as I pointed out, Fauci, you climb the ladder as long as you do the bidding of the regime. It doesn't fucking matter if you actually help the American people whatsoever, or if you hurt them. Doesn't matter. Same thing here. She climbed the ladder because she's a dutiful soldier, not because she's good at keeping presidents alive. And she said today, quote, it's paraphrased, but it's quoting, or it's truncated, but it is a quote. That building in particular has a sloped roof at its highest point. There's a safety factor that would be considered. We wouldn't want to put somebody up on a sloped roof, Kim Cheadle said. Now, I want you to look at this photo of where the counter sniper team for Trump, the ones that we're being told took out the alleged assassin. This is the roof. And no, this isn't doctored. I pulled this right from Google. This is the roof of the gentleman that returned fire on the sniper, ultimately ending the threat. Does that roof look flat to you? Or does it look sloped? Now, I'm going to take you and show you the slope of the roof where allegedly the sniper was firing from. Now, this is a photo of the alleged assassin from the mirror, and you can see this is Thomas Crooks laying there after he has already been removed as a threat, to put it nicely. This is the roof. Again, not a doctored image. This is the slope. Does that look like it is more of a slope to you? Well, the answer is obviously no. It's not more of a slope. And yes, very much that location was known to be a threat, to be, if not the highest threat, certainly one of them, that they would have to have eyes on, which they did. The counter sniper team had eyes on that location. You can see it in the video footage of the attack itself, that they are looking directly in the trajectory of where the shots actually ultimately end up coming from. But Kim Cheadle, the head of the Secret Service, is telling you that they wouldn't want to put a counter sniper team or station Secret Service on that roof because it's sloped. It's too much of an angle. It would ultimately be dangerous for the agents, which I might add, the job of a Secret Service agent is to lay their life down on behalf of the president to keep him alive. That is their explicit duty. That is what they must do. Every single one of them basically take that pledge that they will do so. Dan Bongino, who I opened the show with, is former Secret Service. He knows this intimately. When he tells you that something is wrong here, he's not lying. He might be wrong about some of the details, but I think coming from a former Secret Service agent, you should take it seriously that this is very, very wrong. Something is off deeply. And the entire narrative that they're now portraying through Natasha Bertrand, that in fact, the security measures had been increased because of intel that Iran, in fact, intended to or was planning to make an attempt on Trump, doesn't jive with the facts. How can you possibly say that having the C team, which, by the way, most, as Bongino said, most of the agents that are on the scene are not Secret Service on this event or on this day. Now, if you have intel of an explicit threat against Donald Trump from the Iranians, would you not have the A team on them? Or on him, rather? Well, of course. The answer is of course you would. But no, because Jill Biden, the wife, the first lady of the President of the United States, had an event in the same state that day or very nearby, they moved the normal team, which I guess is the B team, because the A team is obviously on Joe Biden for his protection. They moved the B team over to Jill at the last second, and they put this C team, kind of hodgepodge of local PD and other high-level federal, like DHS protectees or protectors, and then they have just a handful, if not less, of normal Secret Service, normal protection for Donald Trump on the day that there's an attempt made on his life. Now, normally, given that Donald Trump is the favorite to be the next president of the United States, you would think that you would probably have at least your B-plus team on him, given that he is in serious threat. But in fact, you have your C- team on him on the day that there's an attempt made on his life. And now you have the Secret Service agent, which has said she will not step down, absolutely refuses, who has the full confidence of the head of DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, Mayorkas, has come out and said that he has full confidence in her and her ability to do the job, even though she and everybody else in the government has acknowledged that there was a massive security lapse that allowed for this attempt to be made on Donald Trump's life. And no reason for any firings? No reason for her to resign? How? How does that make sense? Now, my opinion, and I certainly can't prove this, is that she's not being asked to stand down because she did what she was told. The same reason that Mayorkas wasn't ultimately impeached and thrown out, because he was doing what he was told. These people, as long as you're doing the bidding of the regime, a la Anthony Fauci, you don't get ousted, you get uplifted. You climb the ladder in the bureaucracy. It doesn't matter how bad you are at your job, because your job is not actually what the American public thinks it is. Your job is to do the bidding of the regime. Anthony Fauci does that dutifully. Now, if you think that government officials' jobs is to actually protect, defend, serve the American people, then it's obvious that Anthony Fauci and Cheadle and Mayorkas all ought to stand down, be fired, and probably investigated and prosecuted. But that doesn't happen. None of them stand down. None of them are told to resign. None of them are fired because they are actually doing their job. And I think that distinction is very important, that people actually grok what I'm saying here. They don't work for you, though they are told, you are told repeatedly that these people are your, I mean, not your representatives because they're all appointees, but certainly the sales job is that they are in fact our dutiful servants, right? They're government servants. No, they're not. They don't work for you, and they certainly don't work to protect the United States president or future president, almost certainly after what happened on Saturday. Sorry for the opening monologue that was very aggressive, but I have a lot to say about this. I just got back from Las Vegas late Sunday, and man, this is crazy. This is crazy. It's weird. There's like these rare times. We've had a few of them as I've been doing Liberty Lockdown. These rare times where you know you're living through history and you're like, this is a historic moment. It's kind of, it wasn't up there probably. I'm not old enough, obviously, to have been around for the JFK assassination, but certainly had that feeling, that gravity, that weight to the moment where you're like, oh, this is big. This is very, very big. I had just wrapped my show that I do with Luke out in Vegas, and about not even a half an hour later, very, very shortly after we wrapped, I was in an elevator, and in a Telegram chat with our We Are Change supporters, someone said there was just an attempt made on Trump's life, or shots fired at Trump. And I was like, nah. I don't think so. But I turned to Josie, because she's in the elevator with me, and I say, I tell her what I just read, and she starts digging. At first, of course, corporate news, you can't find anything on it. We have to go to Twitter to find, or X to actually find out the breaking news. And within 5 minutes, we actually find the footage of the shots being fired. There's about 6 or 7 or 8 shots that appear to have been fired. It's very hard to tell at this junction as to which amount are coming from the assailant, the alleged sniper, and which is counterfire from the counter sniper team. So I'm not going to make a distinction on that. It's very hard to say. I will say this. I think that the conspiracy theories trying to downplay the attempt on Donald Trump's life are misguided at best. I do understand, as a conspiracist at times myself, the instinct to want to not believe what's right before your eyes. But I think in this instance, I am personally fully convinced that there was, in fact, an attempt made on Donald Trump's life, that, in fact, a bullet did graze his right ear. And, in fact, his life was saved, if not by the grace of God, by incredible chance. That he was looking at an immigration chart off to his right, which he was arguing, obviously, that Joe Biden has failed on the border issue, and he's pointing towards it and kind of keeps turning back towards the microphone and talking more directly. And then at the very last second, in total luck, in my opinion, he looks right back to the chart, and as he looks to the chart, his head, which the back of it would have been the actual target, or if not center mass, he turns, and as a consequence, the bullet barely misses him. The people arguing that this incident did not happen, that it was staged, that it was fake, take that up with all of the fans in the stands behind him that took fire. That doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. There's David Icke and others are making strong arguments, not strong, weak arguments, but loud arguments that, in fact, Donald Trump was in on this. I don't buy that whatsoever. I'm sorry. I don't think that Trump would allow for live rounds to be fired just past his body to make him some martyr or something, or some heroic figure, as if he's not already a heroic figure in the eyes of his supporters, as if he wasn't already the favorite to win the presidency again. Why, in God's name, would you take that risk? I don't buy it. Now, I do understand the incredulity in that his reaction to it was so heroic, it's unbelievable. That he stands up after just taking a round mere inches, if not centimeters away from taking his life, and he fist pumps and says fight over and over again to the crowd. It's nuts. It makes no sense that anyone would have that kind of reaction to such an event. So I do understand your unwillingness to believe it, because that does seem totally nuts to me too. But at the same time, I think the more likely answer is that Donald Trump is a weird dude that has a response to things that most human beings don't have. If there was an attempt made on my life, I would definitely not be at the golf course at 9 a.m. the next day, which Donald Trump was. I would be in bed trembling and crying, more than likely. I don't actually know how I would react. I hope I never find out. But Donald Trump is a strange guy. Now, this is also why his supporters love him so much, is that he's that type of dude. I didn't expect it. I'm still in shock. I'm still blown away that would be his reaction. It's weird and amazing and some sort of heroic rise from the ashes that I can't even believe I witnessed. It doesn't make any sense to me, but it happened, okay? It did happen. And I do believe that his surgeon or his doctor that was interviewed and said that he addressed the wounds and that, in fact, Donald Trump has lost or did lose a portion of his top right ear, I take that seriously. Now, I'm yet to see proof of it after the fact because he was at the RNC yesterday, had a crazy, glorious walk-in, and he's got this huge bandage on it. So yeah, I can't prove that aspect of things at this junction. But at this point, given that there are, in fact, casualties directly behind him or in the line of fire behind him, given the fact that there is a hydraulic cable on what looks like, a crane, I'm guessing, that is struck by one of the rounds that is off to the right, which is directly in the line of where the fire would be coming from. Again, that tells me that live rounds are being fired very close to the President of the United States. I don't buy at all that Donald Trump was in on this. I don't. I think the more likely answer is that there is a real attempt made on his life. Now, the real question that we ought to be asking ourselves is who and why. The who and the why gets very convoluted because all of the reporting that's being done right now, particularly the one I just showed you from Natasha Bertrand, does not line up with what we actually know of the security protocols on that day. It doesn't make any sense. The location from which the alleged assassin was firing, the roof that was allegedly too sloped for there to be Secret Service protection located on, which makes absolutely no sense, is approximately 140 yards away from the stage at which Donald Trump is speaking. And you have him laying prone on video as dozens of Trump supporters in the audience are pointing him out and saying, there's a gunman, there's a man with the rifle. Go. Go. Now, we have new reporting that says that, in fact, the building from which he was firing from, and I know for those that haven't been paying close attention to this story, this will come as an absolute shock to you, but this is the reporting, that in fact it was a staging ground for the security detail for Donald Trump. That the rounds were being fired on top of the building in which allegedly one of the counter sniper teams had used as a staging ground. So you talk about the call is coming from inside the house. Scream one. How is that possible? How is that possible? Also, direct line of sight, elevated. Now, I'm not former military or anything like that, but we've all played video games and we've all watched war movies and we've all, thought about this stuff because, especially guys, we always think about, military endeavors and things like that. It's always very interesting. I'm sure some women have that instinct too, but most of the guys I know very much interested in warfare and defense and guns and things like that. This is the top spot that you would expect a sniper to come from. This is the spot, okay? So you're telling me that you have explicit intel or chatter or whatever they're claiming, I don't fucking believe a word of it, that Iran is planning an assassination attempt against the former and future president of the United States, and you don't secure the number one location that a sniper might see as an ideal location to operate from. You don't secure that. If that doesn't set off your radar right away, I don't know why. That's crazy. Okay, let's add to this. There is a more than 2-minute gap between when the fans in the audience are pointing out the gunman and the shots first ring out. So you have minutes of warning. Now, the reporting is that because it was the C- team of Secret Service protection that had been put on Trump and it was being supplemented by additional DHS agents and local PD, that in fact it was the local PD who was responsible for securing that building where the shots came from. Here's why this doesn't make sense. First off, it's the top location from which you would expect a sniper to be. So why would you not put the best guys in charge of securing it? Why would you rely on local PD? That doesn't make sense. Okay, now you have reports that the ladder that he used to get there, that the assailant used to get to that location, was in fact climbed by local PD because of the warnings that were coming from the Trump supporters who saw the gunman laying there, that climbed the ladder, and upon breaching the top so he could actually see the gunman turns, points his rifle at the local PD, and the local policeman, instead of, because he was told, by the way, the reason he goes up there is because he's being told that there's a gunman up there. But he climbs the ladder without his firearm drawn. Does that make sense? Okay, sure. Maybe that's just negligence because local PD don't ever expect anything to happen and he's caught off guard. That to me is crazy negligence, but I'll say it's possible. Maybe. He panics, ducks his head, and and then falls off the ladder, according to reports, injuring himself. Minutes later, shots ring out. He's not stopped. Crazy. But here's what you really ought to be asking yourself. Why, given that you now know for a fact that there is a sniper on a building, and you have minutes of lead time before those shots are then taken at the former and likely future president of the United States, do you not relay the information to Secret Service? Well, you have to assume that they did. And you have to assume that if you're going to rely on local PD to supplement your security because you don't have your A-team there to do the job themselves, well, you have to have some line of communication that is established between local PD and Secret Service. So I have to assume that that message was relayed from local PD to Trump's protection team. So now here's the obvious question. How is it possible that you have all of these fans that see this sniper, you have a local PD guy who goes up there, confirms there's a sniper, falls down, hurts himself, undoubtedly that message is relayed to Secret Service, and yet the counter-sniper team does not fire on him, and you don't remove Donald Trump from the location from which he's speaking, from the stage? How? How is that at all possible? And the obvious answer, and honestly, it pains me to even think it or say it out loud, but the obvious answer to me, my deep suspicion, is that you stood down. That you were not supposed to remove him from that threat. How is that possible? In modern America, how is that possible? Now, in 1963, I think it was 63, that JFK was assassinated, there was really no capacity to video from the consumer level. In fact, the famous footage of him being assassinated comes from, and it's famously known as, the Zapruder film, because it's the only footage. Because no one had cell phones, obviously. I didn't even have a cell phone when I was born. But no one has cell phones. No one has the capacity to video. I don't think, personally, that they even intended to have footage of JFK's assassination. That their expectation was that it was going to happen, and it was just going to be eyewitness accounts, and that was all there was to it, and it was going to be way easier to cover up. But because of the Zapruder footage, what you have is an obvious conflict with the official report and what you see with your own eyes, in that it appears that there are multiple trajectories from which President JFK was hit, which is why his head goes down and then back up. And which is why I believe, personally, that there was probably multiple gunmen. And I don't think the American people were ever supposed to know that or even suspect it. And if you didn't have that Zapruder film, you wouldn't have known it at all. You wouldn't have even had the capacity to suspect it. And no one would have believed you if you did. So the reason I'm so in shock that this attempt was made is that everyone's got cell phones. You've got thousands and thousands of people there with cell phones and the capacity to take live video, and not just live video, but just tape it. And on top of that, Donald Trump is speaking. The most famous man in the world is speaking, and this is their hero. They're all going to have their cell phones out, and they're all going to be videoing it. Now, here's another weird thing. There had been no coverage of Donald Trump's rallies for months and months, if not years and years. They had no interest. The corporate news had no interest in covering his rallies because he's a threat to democracy. He's this dangerous fascist dictator, all that. Yeah, okay, fine. But they hadn't been covering it. But this one got covered. Not by all of them, but by more than is customary, for sure. Odd, right? Odd. And my suspicion, my fear, is that Donald Trump was not supposed to survive this attack. That, in fact, their intention was to remove him from the chessboard, to put it nicely. And that, in fact, because this event happened just 48 hours before the RNC, and Donald Trump had not selected his vice president yet, but had certainly rumors had been swirling, and I would not be surprised if insiders knew that it was to be J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance, who very much opposes the funding to the war in Ukraine, along with Donald Trump, who does as well. You have 48 hours window to remove Donald Trump before he declares his vice presidential nominee and ultimately makes it impossible or much more challenging for you to remove them from the chessboard. And in that window, there's an attempt made on his life. And in that window, the Secret Service doesn't do its job, and that's putting it nicely. That's a confluence of events that I struggle to imagine as being happenstance, personally. And on top of that, it looks to me, personally, that the docket, the lineup of speakers at the RNC, the multicultural menagerie, it strikes me that perhaps Donald Trump was not supposed to be the nominee for this event. And it concerns me that perhaps someone like Nikki Haley was in fact supposed to be his replacement. While the nation was in mourning that you would foist the neocons' princess upon us. Now, again, this is my suspicion. I can't prove that. But it gives me great concern that this is a more rational explanation as opposed to the alleged narrative that we're supposed to buy that's coming from the corporate media and from the Secret Service and coming from the Biden administration. What you tell me which sounds more rational. Given that you had the Maidan Revolution in 2014, given that you have Victoria Nuland and John McCain and Lindsey Graham that are all driving towards a hot war with Russia, or at least trying to foment a divide between Ukraine and Russia, given that Russia in their leaked cables are saying "niet" means "niet," and that if you ultimately add Ukraine into NATO, it will mean world war or war against NATO and between Russia and NATO. Given that they clearly fear losing this war in Ukraine, which is almost certainly going to happen and will certainly happen if Donald Trump becomes the president and he removes funding to it. And given that you have a 48-hour window of opportunity to make that change, and given that there's an attempt made on Donald Trump's life, what conclusion are you to come to? It's not easy. I don't like thinking like this. I don't like feeling like this is the more logical answer. But it does seem to me to be the more logical answer. I'm just being honest. I can't lie to you. And I hope that as new developments unfold and there's more information that's reported on, that there are more benign explanations that emerge. Sincerely, I do. But I don't think so. I'm not at all confident that that will happen. And if that's the case, if in fact the establishment made a move on Donald Trump's life, then where do we go from here? I don't know. I'll just tell you straight out. I don't know. But I'll tell you this for sure. Over the next 4 months or less, this is the most perilous time in my life, in American history, perhaps, that there are now reports because of this Bertrand reporting that if in fact Iran is attempting to, which I don't buy, but okay, maybe. What if there's another attempt on his life? And what if they succeed? Well, given that his supporters are already on high alert, the highest alert possible, that does not portend good things for this country. Monetary Metals is providing a true alternative to saving and earning in dollars by making it possible to save and earn in gold and silver. Monetary Metals has been paying interest on gold and silver for over 8 years. Right now, accredited investors can earn 12% annual interest on silver paid in silver in their latest silver bond offering. For example, if you have 1,000 ounces of silver in the deal, you receive 120 ounces of silver interest paid to your account in the first year. Go to the link in the description or head to monetarymetals.com/lockdown to learn more about how to participate and start earning a return on honest money again with Monetary Metals. This is the first true silver bond since 1834. Earn 12% annual interest on silver paid in silver, but you must be an accredited investor to participate. Again, it's a 3-year term, and the bond is financing a publicly traded mining company located in the western United States. Head to the link in the description to learn more. I'm not at all certain how they would respond. I would like to believe that they would remain peaceful, but I have no idea. And personally, I doubt it. I doubt it. And it makes me seriously nervous. And it makes me seriously nervous that if my suspicions are right about what did transpire on Saturday, that it becomes increasingly likely that there will be another attempt made on him. And that makes me nervous. On the inverse of that, it also makes me concerned that given that Joe Biden has absolutely no chance of winning, that they start to go plan B route and they say, okay, now let's realign our victim. Let's try and orient towards demonizing Trump supporters. Let's portray them as responsible for an attack on him. I have no evidence that that's the case. It's my fear. I just want to make that very clear. But I think there is some obvious tactical logic as to why they might. So basically what I'm saying is either way, we need everyone to stay alive, at least for the next 4 months, because everyone is on high alert. Everyone is at their wits' end. And I just don't know how we get through this period, but by the grace of God, if I'm being honest. It's so dangerous. It's crazy dangerous. And that's on top of what's already on the back burner here that's been simmering forever, which is potential war with Iran, potential war with Russia, potential war with China, economic turmoil, banking collapse, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot. There's a lot on our plate in terms of concerns as is. We don't really need this too. But it's here, like it or not. Deal with it how you may. Wow. What a crazy just national condition we face. It's amazing to me. Now here's an amazing edit or compilation of footage from attendees as well as the normal TV coverage that's put as a compilation so that you can actually get a lay of the land and basically a time assessment.
He was doing his job. I wouldn't even be doing this. It's a beautiful place with a gorgeous ocean. The
Look, they're all
Mediterranean,
pointing.
The Atlantic, maybe the Pacific.
Yeah, someone's on top of the roof. Look, there he is right there.
So real quick, he says they're all pointing. So the reason he turns to look at the gunman is because there are already people that are pointing at him. So in fact, this clock that starts, really it starts quite a bit before that. Now on top of that, we now have reports that in fact the gunman was on the Secret Service's radar, as they say, for approximately 27 minutes. So nearly a half an hour before that they had seen him. And this is where it gets even crazier. They claim that they saw him with a rangefinder. A rangefinder, to my understanding, is a device that essentially allows you to sight in a scope on a gun, or basically it allows you to know like where you should be aiming and if you have to adjust at all because of the range of the shot that you intend to take. So they see a man with a rangefinder more than a half an hour, but they don't prevent Donald Trump from taking the stage. How is that at all possible? You have not secured the threat. You saw a man with a rangefinder. You don't stop him. And then you still let Trump take the stage. There's no way that happens. That's a level of negligence that I simply cannot accept. There's no way that's real. So you have to conclude something else. I'll allow you to do so if you choose to.
Right there, see him? He's laying down, see him?
Yeah, he's laying down.
And still I'm here with you fighting like hell to get a senator.
What's happening?
And to make sure we take back the White House, because if we do, we're going to make America better than ever before. We're going to make it.
Yeah, look.
And it's
There he
not
is.
easy, because we have millions and millions of people in our country that shouldn't be here. Dangerous people. Criminals. We have criminals. We have drug dealers. We have people that should not be here. And it's much tougher than if it happened. We have the strongest border ever. In recorded history, we're the best border. In fact, if they could ever put up a chart, I don't know if they can do it. Do you guys have access to that chart that I love so much? You don't mind if I go off teleprompter, do you? Because these teleprompters are so damn boring, I try and explain that. Oh, there's a, wow. You guys are doing it. They're getting better with time. My guys, take a look at that chart. Take a look at the arrow on the bottom. See the big red arrow, right? So that's when I left office. That was the lowest point, and that comes right from the government services, comes right out of Border Patrol. Take a look at that. So that arrow is the lowest amount of illegal immigration ever in recorded history into our country. And then the worst president in the history of our country took over. And look what happened to our country. Probably 20 million people. And you know, that's a little bit old, that chart. That chart's a couple of months old, and if you want to look and see something that says,
I hope he's turning this way. Be careful, guys.
We got breaking news. Coming in. Shots fired. Seems to be shots fired at the Trump rally. Is he okay? We need to go live right now. We don't know if President Trump has been shot. We know he hit the ground. We do not know if President Trump has been shot. He's up. He's up. Shots are still continuing to be fired. He's giving a thumbs up, everybody. He's giving a thumbs up. Breaking news right now. This is Vanessa Broussard reporting to you live from Butler, Pennsylvania. We hear shots fired at at the rally not 10 to 15 minutes after President Trump arrived. He hit the ground, unheard of yet if he has been hit by gunfire.
First off, major shout out to Milk Bar TV. Just an amazing compilation to put together like that so that we can actually get a real feel for everything that transpired. I think that I've got a lot of takeaways from it. But first off, you see within 20 seconds or so, you have fans in the stands behind Trump to his right that, I guess, stage right, that are pointing saying, hit in the head, that Mr. Comparatore had been unfortunately killed, tragically killed, I should say. And I just don't believe at all that that didn't happen. And I don't believe at all that there wasn't live rounds that were being fired. So the obvious conclusion from my vantage point is that this is totally real and that this was in fact a legitimate attempt made on Trump's life. To believe otherwise, you have to believe that the shots were taken but intentionally missed and that Trump was in on it and that he was okay with live rounds being fired towards him, which even if you just believe he's a narcissist, that he would ever accept that as a price to make him some sort of godlike figure, I don't buy. But on top of that, assuming he's not a total narcissist and he actually has a soul whatsoever, I find it very hard to believe that he would sign off on them firing rounds into his fans in the stands. That seems crazy to me too. So I don't buy that at all, personally. If you're the type that does, okay. I've talked to a lot of you over the past 72 hours. There's a lot of real conspiracy theorists out there. I guess I'm not one of you. I don't know. But I think this is a totally real attempt on Trump's life. And based off of the lead time, based off of the fact that reports say that Secret Service knew that there was a real serious threat with a rangefinder approximately 27 minutes prior to the shots ringing out, and that you still let Trump take that stage, I don't buy it. It doesn't make sense. Given that you have a gunman who's laying on a roof, which the head of the Secret Service says was too pitched to put her agents up there, but is in fact, as you saw in that footage, significantly more flat than the one that the counter-sniper team is actually perched upon. That doesn't pass the sniff test whatsoever, and it also really, it's insulting on a scale I can barely put into words. I don't believe anyone believes that. On top of the fact that the Secret Service's job is to lay their life down to defend the president, but you're telling me that we have such OSHA requirements that we can no longer put counter sniper teams on pitched roofs? Guys that almost certainly are former military veterans, fought in the mountains of Afghanistan, but they can't handle a 20-degree pitch on a roof? Get the fuck out of here. That's insanely insulting to your and my intelligence. There's no way that's protocol. Now, Ben Shapiro reports that, in fact, the standard operating procedure is that you're not allowed to fire until fired upon. I don't believe that either. If that is, in fact, protocol, what is the purpose of the Secret Service? Your job is to lay your life down to keep the president alive, but you're not allowed to take a shot if you see an imminent threat before they actually open fire? That doesn't pass the sniff test to me either. And if that is the procedure, well, then you need to change it because that's crazy. So, doesn't pass the sniff test that is their procedure. But even if it is, what the fuck's going on there? Now, in contrast to what Ben Shapiro was reporting, that standard operating procedure is that they cannot fire on an assailant until fired upon, which I do not buy. Here's what NBC News was reporting about it.
That the roof where the shooter was located was a well-known, high-priority vulnerability. It was identified just the day before during a security walkthrough. We've also just learned that there were 2 counter-sniper teams on site and that the counter-sniper did not need approval to shoot. One source telling NBC News that prior protocols were not followed.
So there you have it. Now they said it was one source, so they could be wrong. But just rationally, you're trying to protect the most important person in the country, probably. And you have to wait for fire to come in before you're able to return fire. Cops don't even have that protocol. If a perp raises their arm with a firearm, you're allowed to fire. So I don't believe at all that that's standard procedure. That if you see a guy with a sniper rifle 130 yards out, that you're not allowed to fire first. No way. There's just no way. You have a sniper team. They know they know that there's a serious threat. You have local PD who approaches that threat, but no one stops him. He's got a clean line of sight, elevated position, and he takes a very clean shot at the former and future, most certainly after this event, President of the United States, missing him by centimeters. I don't think he was supposed to miss. I don't think he was supposed to fail. I really don't. I don't think that this is a false event or anything like that. I really don't. So I think that then it's up to you to conclude who and why. As I said to open this, we're only 3 days into the event. The reporting on it is evolving very rapidly, and I'm not going to give you a firm conclusion. I think that's up to each of us to make, and because it's such a heavy topic to decide on, I wouldn't want to make it for you anyways. I think it's really important that people think for themselves. I think it's really important that people analyze the news for themselves, that they look at the footage themselves, that they do not take the word of corporate journalists who are so full of shit. It's unbelievable. This is a historic moment on a lot of levels, and it's up to each of us to actually inform ourselves here. I think we're kind of on our own. I'll do my best to help you in that process, but you got to do some work too. I know that's no one likes to be told you got to do some work, but with an event like this, I think it's really important that we get to the bottom of it, and I think it's really important that we don't be led astray in terms of blaming the wrong people. Now, I haven't even gotten... Now, I just want you to note, we're 40 plus minutes into this. I haven't even mentioned the gunman himself, because from my vantage point, that's not very relevant. But he's an alleged 20-year-old who has a phone that they struggled for days to crack. Apparently, they just recently cracked it, and he's got no motive. And he worked alone, and they knew that before they had even cracked his phone. How would you possibly know that he had worked alone before he cracked his phone? I don't know. He's also a 20-year-old who reports say that he was kicked off of his shooting team in high school because he was so bad. That's the reports. I don't know if that's true. Seems kind of crazy. I don't know how you could actually be that bad that a high school team that's supposed to teach you how to do it would still be like, you're too bad to even be on this team. That sounds crazy, but that's the report. Okay. But then he becomes a sniper that comes within millimeters of actually succeeding in his task. That seems totally unbelievable to me. Okay. He's also a 20-year-old man who's got no social media. Now, there are additional or increasing numbers of 18 to 25 to 30-year-olds that are kind of doing away with social media because they've seen what it's done to the older generations and they're going away from it. But it's pretty rare. That's a very small minority. The vast majority, 90+%, I'm sure, have social media of some variety. Apparently, this is the guy that doesn't. Now, he does have a Steam account, which there has been reports that he was playing some sort of sniper game. Okay, maybe. He's also a registered Republican, but he lived in Pennsylvania, which is a closed primary, which could easily just be explained by he wanted to vote against Donald Trump in the primary, so he registered as a Republican, and in fact, he's not one. That's certainly a possibility. Also, on Joe Biden's first day or month, at least, of his presidency, he donated $15 to some sort of like Act Blue spinoff to the Democrats. So this guy is a registered Republican that's voting, or excuse me, donating a pittance to the Democrat politicians. Weird, right? Kind of like a perfect non-entity that you can't really judge. You just throw your hands up. I can't get a read on this guy. I have no idea. He's got no social media. He's got no motive. His phone doesn't give us any information. He's a registered Republican, but he sends money to Democrats. I don't know who to blame. Perfect guy, right? Where you just go, I don't know. It doesn't add up. It doesn't give me much. But he's bad at a shot, totally untrained, doesn't have a real capacity to get into a position to take this shot. Allegedly within 72 hours of the event, or 48 hours actually, goes out and buys like 50 rounds of ammunition and buys a ladder. He didn't own a ladder. This is a pretty high level attempt to be making on 48 hours notice, and you're within 48 hours you're planning this out. Okay, maybe. But he knows he's going to need a ladder, so he's already decided on the location. Right? Because he has to know it's going to be elevated. Right? So, and yet it's the most likely location, or one of a handful, 2 or 3, that would be the most likely location that a potential assassin might look to for a good vantage point, and it's unguarded. And you're able to climb up on it within 10 minutes, 5 minutes, of the President of the United States taking the stage, and you don't stop him. Here's the FBI report stating that they believe the shooter acted alone.
Official is telling Fox they believe the shooter acted alone. We're also learning that they can't get into his cell phone. They have it at Quantico, but haven't been able to get any data out of it.
Just consider everything I've laid out for you, and you tell me that this makes sense. How? How can he pull this off? I don't think he can. Not without help. I don't. I can't. I cannot lie to you. I don't think he can pull it off on his own. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. It's just too. There's just too many variables that make you go like, all right, come on now. Like, I think everyone is feeling that way. I really do. In fact, I had a crazy viral tweet that I put out yesterday. Let me read it to you because it had 50,000+ likes. So obviously this is the sentiment that a lot of people are tussling with themselves. By the way, just a tip for those that are on social media. I think that the best way to go viral is to capture, and this is very challenging to do. It's better if you don't actually attempt to do it, but I'll just tell you, like, from someone who's been on X for years and has had a lot of successful tweets, the most successful ones are during big events that if you can capture the oeuvre, if you can capture the kind of the air of the moment and put it in a way that people are struggling to kind of put into words, but everyone's feeling, that has people just see it and go, ah, yes, that's the thing that will go super viral. I just wanted to give you that tip if you're in social media, which God forbid if you are. But I said, the country is in rough shape when there's an assassination attempt, and the only real debate is to whether or not the government was in on it, or they are just so fucking awful at even the most basic tasks that we can no longer tell the difference. And that's the truth. I don't know which it is definitively, as I've been painfully careful to say to you. But the evidence, in my humble opinion, makes me lean away from negligence and towards intentionality. That's my leaning, not a conclusion. Just making it very clear. Crazy. What an absolutely crazy 72 hours. Like each new news piece that comes out is like more outrageous than the last. And yet there has not been, I think what frustrates me most is that there hasn't been real communication with the American people as we're all in this kind of spiral of trying to figure out the truth of what transpired. That, yes, I understand investigations take time, but can you give us some straight answers as to a few obvious questions? Why was that location not secured? If you relied on local PD to do so, who failed? Right. As of now, the Secret Service is pointing their finger at local PD. Local PD is pointing their finger back at Secret Service. DHS is, catching blame, I'm sure, from some entities. Like, give us an answer as to why the counter sniper team didn't fire before he did. Just say it. I'm not saying I'll buy it, especially if you tell me an obvious lie. I probably won't buy it. But give me an explanation. I have to have an explanation to that. That makes no sense. Why, given that there are plentiful reports that at minimum, based off the video, at minimum, you had 2 minutes notice. Say the report is wrong, that it was 27 minutes that they had this dude on their radar. Say it's only 2 minutes notice. Still, you have to have some sort of communication measures that allow for local PD to convey that, in fact, there's a imminent threat, very, very imminent threat, in which case, undoubtedly, the protocol is, even if you don't have authorization for the counter sniper team to take fire, or maybe you don't have him in your sights, you have to remove the president from the stage. You have to. There's no way that's not protocol. I'm sorry. So you didn't. How is that possible? Give me an answer to that, at minimum. But you don't. So essentially what they do is they leave us with such a dearth of information, such a limited amount of actual facts, that we are then forced, because it's been 3 days. There's no reason that you shouldn't be giving us some basic answers to obvious questions, right? They leave us to come to conclusions ourselves. And some of those conclusions will undoubtedly be wrong, but some of them may be right. And we don't know which is which, right? But in that void, we are left to theorize because we don't know for sure, but we know that what we're being told so far doesn't add up. So we theorize, and then they say, how dare you? So they withhold the information which forces you to theorize, and then when you theorize, they chastise you for doing so. It's totally unfair. Everybody wants to know what happened. Everybody has their suspicions. Everybody wants answers. There's nothing wrong with wanting that. This was an attempt on the former and likely future president of the United States. Everyone should want an answer to what happened here. So you shouldn't feel shamed or guilty for wanting an answer. And you certainly shouldn't be, deplatformed or anything like that because you come to a conclusion or theory that may be wrong. We have to be able to ask these questions because the fucking media almost certainly won't. But they create the circumstances by which we do this, and then they shame us for behaving in a way that's totally human. That you leave me with lack of answers, and then I seek them. And then you tell me that I shouldn't be allowed to talk about it. It's an absurdity. I hate the dynamic. I really do. Here's the opinion of Dallas Alexander, who was a sniper himself.
I spent just about 17 years in the military, just about 14 of which were at Tier 1 Special Operations Unit called JTF-2. Our sniper team has the world record for the longest confirmed sniper kill. And a huge part of our job while I was there and while I was a sniper was doing close protection for VIPs up to and including the Prime Minister when he would go to dangerous countries like Iraq or Afghanistan. We would be in charge of that security. So I'm very familiar with the layout of these types of things and what the jobs should be. And yesterday, what happened, I have no doubts in my mind that the shooter had help from somewhere within an agency, an organization, or the government. The second I saw that aerial photo of what they were saying happened, it immediately made no sense to me. You cannot, in broad daylight, get onto a rooftop within, it looked like maybe a couple hundred yards, if that. You can't get into that position with a gun when there's a president speaking. It cannot be done. It's not like you don't even need to be a sniper to know that it's the most fucking obvious thing, an obvious place in the whole world. You could be a 7th grader, like, what do we need to do for security here? Well, let's look at these rooftops that are almost within zeroing range of a rifle. So it's something happened, and I'm not pointing fingers at anyone. It's too obvious that this guy had help getting there. So whether it's someone turned a blind eye or it was strategically planned, I mean, it had to be planned to a certain level.
So that's one opinion of a former sniper, but that's amazingly, not the only one. We also have a Green Beret Special Forces sniper who has a very similar take, but with a little bit more detail. Here's what he had to say.
My name is Matthew Murphy, and I am a retired Green Beret, retired from this Special Forces group, but I'm also a level 1 sniper, which means that I have graduated the highest level of training for snipers that you can do in special operations. We're trained, I'm going to avoid confidential or classified terminology, we're trained in assassinations and counter-assassinations for the very reason, case in point, yesterday, the shooting of President Donald Trump. So, first of all, anywhere the president's going to go, there are teams from the Secret Service that go out days, if not weeks, if not months, before the president will ever be at that spot. And they do a site security assessment. And they do that with the local police forces and agencies to ensure that every potential security threat or vulnerability is secured and, of course, protected against. Now, this is done way before Donald Trump will ever get there, and they know every place that the president will be, and the sniper team especially is responsible for ensuring that no one can take a shot at the president. Now, that does not mean that the sniper team just sets up with their guns and scans the crowd and shoots. No, what they do, the most important thing they do pre-Donald Trump showing up, is within a 360-degree environment of that podium of the president, they ensure that there is not a place that is open that will be accessible by someone with a rifle to take a shot at the president. So they make sure those places are barricaded off, inaccessible, and heavily guarded, so there is no way you are going to get to the place where you can even shoot the president with a rifle before the president shows up. Then they scan the crowd and those places of the rifle just in case by some miracle you do. Now, you're not going to tell me, I don't care who you are, don't listen to the media, nonsense anyways, I think most of us know that by now, that some 20-year-old kid that looks like he played Dungeons and Dragons in his mom's basement is trained on a gun, especially a sniper rifle like that, is a registered Republican, and then can access anywhere near the vicinity of that crowd, of that event, with him not dressed in a uniform and that sniper rifle. He was wearing American flag t-shirt and pants, and he had a rifle. You're going to tell me that that kid went through all the levels of security, somehow got into the closest building to the president, then accessed the rooftop of the closest building to the president, then had the time to unpack his rifle, lay down in the prone, and then take 5 to 8 well-aimed shots at the president before he was decisively engaged by the Secret Service's counter-sniper teams or a local police department. I don't know who they were. Most likely police. You're going to tell me all that happened and a 20-year-old kid did that without it being heavily planned, coordinated, and people on the inside making it happen? There is absolutely no way possible that that kid was able to get up there and take those shots at the president without a lot of internal help. So someone in that local, or some people inside that local police department, agencies, or Secret Service is compromised and is a threat to our president. So we need to stop worrying about that damn shooter and start worrying about who allowed this shit to happen.
Okay, there's not one, not two former snipers that think that something's off about this story. But we also have Corey Mills, who went on Fox News. He is a former Army sniper and also sitting congressman, and he has this to say.
Let's bring in Florida Congressman and former U.S. Army sniper, Corey Mills. What kind of shot was this, Corey, from 130 yards?
Look, at the end of the day, this is a shot that your basic training boot camp soldier is requested to make within their 9-week period. This is one of the easiest shots, and they train all the way out till 300 or 500. And when I was doing the counter sniper, it wasn't with the United States Army. It was actually when I was with the State Department and was doing this exact thing, which is trying to look at going out with an advanced team, establishing what the perimeter is. And then as a sniper, when you would set up, you'd put together your range sketch or your range fan cards. And that would tell you where your 100, your 200, your 300, and you'd identify the areas of threat that you would be able to mitigate. And if there's multiple targets, you understand that your elevation and windage knob wouldn't have to be messed with, especially at 160 yards. You could literally just look, quickly glance, and know from the reference point, whether it be a building, whether it be a lone tree, whether it be a parking lot, maybe it's a road.
I want to pause it there and show you guys that graphic one more time, because I think this is important to recognize. The counter snipers, which are here in this photo, are up on this barn, which, by the way, is not flat, significantly more slope than the building from which the sniper actually took the shots. But you have the stage here. So Trump is facing this direction. Oh, sorry, you can't see my hands probably. It's very tough to line this up, but you have the shots that are taking. You have the counter sniper team that's looking directly at him. It's 130 yards. It's exactly the distance from which a sniper would ideally want to be on what is essentially close to a flat roof, and he's laying prone, so he's got as steady a shot as he could possibly get. You have not one, not two, but three former snipers who all think that this story stinks to high heaven, and you also have a former Secret Service agent in Dan Bongino who is quite confident that what we're being told is not accurate. So I just want to give that summation, because I think it's important that you realize this is not just like a one-off. This is not just like, oh, we suspect this just because we don't trust the government and that's all there is to it. Like, no, this stinks. This doesn't make any sense. And when you lay out all of the evidence, it's like, how do you come to any conclusion other than we're being lied to? Just to what scale is the only question here. Now, for those that are saying that the trajectory doesn't make sense or that his head turn wouldn't have saved his life, I want you to see this photo, because I had a listener or follower of mine on X send it to me, and I haven't seen it anywhere else. So it's really enlightening to give you kind of a spatial analysis so you can actually understand what happened here. So we have, this is the building, the two-slope building to put any sort of security on, from which the alleged sniper fired, right about here, I believe. And this is the stage. Trump is facing this direction, and right behind him, I believe it was approximately here, where Mr. Comparatore tragically lost his life. The bullet fires basically from here, misses Trump, hits this guy, and hits this rail. So trajectory-wise, if you yank your rifle as you fire, it makes perfect sense that the bullet, which should have landed here, ends up landing here. Now, my assumption is that it was probably not the first round fired. I would imagine the first round fired is the one that grazes Trump's ear, because you would suspect that that would probably be the most accurate. And then after that, you panic and you just fire off as many shots as you can. That's my guess. I don't know for sure. But it makes perfect sense to me that Trump, facing this way, looks at this chart here, turns his head ever so slightly further this direction, and that bullet comes whizzing by. So I think that all makes sense if you're able to kind of, put it in your mind and imagine it. This photo helps tremendously in getting a lay of the land and understanding, where it would have come from. So it makes the story sound more legitimate. Also, up here, there are some eyewitness reports that say that they saw people firing at or from this water tower. Now, I personally I'm leaning towards discounting this, simply because if you hear gunfire and it's coming from this direction and you look this direction with your naked eye, you're not going to be able to see up here, but you know that you heard the gunfire coming from over here. You turn your head, you glance, you see this water tower. It certainly makes sense that that would be a place that gunfire might be coming from, and you just assume in hindsight, and you say, I think that's where it was coming from. So that's my assumption at this point, that these people probably did not see someone firing from there, but I'll keep an open mind. It's certainly, grassy knoll type of stuff, that there could be another shooter that's firing from here. But at this point, I don't think there's enough evidence to confirm that. There's no video or anything like that that shows people firing at or from this water tower. But I just wanted to include that so people, that I'm considering as many angles as I can here. And here's one more photo that I wanted to show you guys so that you can get more, spatially aligned in analyzing this. I believe that this Trump stage is angled like this. And when he's giving his speech, he's going to be back over here. So he's actually angled off to the right of the stage here. So I don't want to have you get misaligned here. But the building where the sniper fire came from was here. So now because it is pitched, he would be able to have some cover. So the line of sight from the counter sniper team, you probably wouldn't be able to see him until he got to the apex of the curvature, essentially the peak of the roof. But as you can see, this would be a obvious security risk and threat that you would 100% have secured. And it was not. And in fact, this building, this structure, reportedly is where another counter sniper team was inside having coffee. What the fuck? That's the report. I don't know if it's accurate 100%. As I said, things are going to be developing. But if that's true, that's crazy. But even if that part of it isn't true, it still doesn't explain why this building is not your top priority to secure, or how a 20-year-old untrained dude gets up there with a rifle and no one stops him. Doesn't add up.
Bottom line is that this is massive negligence to the point of me speculating on what was intentional and what wasn't.
Wow. When you're doing a site survey and you're seeing this rooftop not that far away, why did it look like the counter sniper team was a little surprised?
You know, I can only speculate, and we'll have to wait until the investigation comes out, that they thought local law enforcement was potentially climbing up onto the roof when they saw a dark object on a light roof. But here's the issue.
Wait, you're saying maybe they misconstrued crooks for a friendly, for local law enforcement?
It's very possible. I don't want to speculate until the investigation is over, but the bottom line is that if you saw someone climbing onto a roof that you hadn't authorized any clearance on, it's got a clear line of sight. It's exactly adjacent to the shooting where the president was sitting, and you're talking about a pop shot, and you've got people yelling, and there should have been comms. The minute that local law enforcement, who apparently had a rifle pointed on, there should have been an emergency frequent comms channel that they could have said, we have a shooter on the roof, shooter on the roof. Secret Service should have rushed the stage and immediately took the president and took him off, and then responded to the counter sniper. The shot should not have gone off. That is the failure in itself. You're supposed to be able to try and, the best security is when you go in and you're actually able to prevent an incident, not react to an incident. But I can tell you, under this Biden administration, the one thing I've seen is massive DEI hires. And I can tell you, when you primarily go after DEI, you end up with DIE.
Catchy phrase, but he might not be wrong. And I think he's former sniper. We've got 3 former snipers, former Secret Service, all of them coming to the same conclusion. Could they all be wrong? Sure, maybe. But I think it's worth considering their opinions deeply. Actually, it's probably their opinions are worth considering more than my own, because I'm not a former sniper, former Secret Service, former military. But as that one guy said, it doesn't really require an expert to sniff this out and go, something's off deeply. And the fact that location, the prime location, even if you think it's a friendly, maybe you think it's a friendly, you pull Trump if you don't know. If you don't know for sure that you're looking down your sights and you see a dude with a rifle himself and you think it might be a friendly, but you don't know for sure, you pull Trump. You cannot leave him up there. You can't. Does anybody think that's rational? That you see a guy that you don't know who he is with a rifle 130 yards out from the former president of the United States, and you don't pull Trump from that stage? Bullshit. No fucking way. There's no way. Sorry. No way. Now let's flash back to the episode I did just a week ago, which was like the RFKs telling unspeakable truths and no one is listening, or whatever I titled it. RFK is convinced that, in fact, the gunman that ultimately took his father's life, RFK Sr., was an asset to the CIA. That's his belief. Certainly, he's done a ton of research on it. There's a tremendous amount of suspicion that the story when it comes to JFK is not as we've been told. The single bullet that ricochets through his entire body. I mean, it kind of strains credulity, does it not? So you have the JFK story, likely not what we were told. RFK story, likely not what we were told. You have a civil case that said that, in fact, the government was liable for Martin Luther King to some extent. I haven't dug deep on that one. I did years ago. I can't remember all the details. Lots of civil rights leaders, right? And each time it's basically blamed on a lone gunman, is it not? And this one is being blamed on a lone gunman, is it not? And are there not all of the same hallmarks of the same confusion and evidence that leads you to a different conclusion when it comes to this event as probably has led you to the same conclusion when it comes to JFK, RFK, MLK, all of the three-letter that ends in case? I think so. So I'm just trying to explain essentially why I'm so skeptical of this narrative and why I'm leaning towards there being government involvement. It has all of the hallmarks. It does. It seems more rational than any other conclusion at this junction. And I hope that I can come to a different conclusion in the not too distant future. I genuinely do. I would really rather not believe that this is the lengths that they might be willing to take. But that's what it looks like at this point. So, man, a lot of people will ask themselves, and I'm one of them, why is Trump such a threat? I mean, he went along with arming Ukraine. He went along with COVID lockdowns, all that. He printed and spent into oblivion. And I think at the end of the day, my conclusion personally is that he's just not as pro-war as they want. And he's also not just entirely their puppet a la a Joe Biden or a Barack Obama. And I know this will hurt some feelings to say that I think Barack Obama was a total puppet of the regime, but that's my belief. And Biden clearly is, so there's no argument there. And I think that Trump just having a little bit of autonomy is enough to make the regime absolutely lose their mind. And by the regime, I think that the highest level, there's lots of interests that are ultimately in control of our political establishment. But my personal opinion is that, yes, pharma and a whole bunch of other industries, but I think that the military complex is probably the most powerful and the most dangerous. And a lot of people suspect, I'll include myself in the suspecting this category, that it was probably JFK's unwillingness with Vietnam or desire to get out. RFK obviously walking in his footsteps and likely to be the future president too would have been a threat to them. Also, he went after the mob, so maybe there's an angle there to consider. But I think that Trump's hesitancy and an open desire to avoid war with Russia, given that this has been the game plan that has been laid out with the Russia collusion nonsense and the Steele dossier and the FBI spying on his campaign and all this, that he is just a threat to them because he doesn't want that war that they worked so hard to bring about via McCain and Newland and Graham and all these scumbags. That's my read. That's why he's really a threat. He also represents a populist right-wing movement, which is nationalistic, and I think that also presents a threat to these kind of globalist intentions when it comes to creating, NATO, UN, World Economic Forum type of stuff. So I think that's it. I think that's the answer. I think that's why he's a threat. And also, he's this massive figurehead to this populist right-wing movement that exists in this country and is a burgeoning movement all over the world, as you've seen in Europe. And I believe that that's a consequence of the open border crisis that exists within Europe, but maybe even more so in America. It just doesn't feel as bad here because we have so much more land. But in terms of numbers, it's actually much more significant here than it is in the UK or any of these individual countries. So I think that's why a populist right-wing movement is on the rise. And I think that's why those that are more interested in globalist government models are so concerned. So it would be very much in their interest to not have that movement gain steam or continue or take the White House again. And I think that's a fairly obvious answer as to why someone might want him taken out. We've got some breaking news when it comes to the allegations against Iran. Iran says, spokesman for the permanent mission of Iran to the UN says, quote, these accusations are unsubstantiated and malicious. From the perspective of the Islamic Republic of Iran, Trump is a criminal who must be prosecuted and punished in a court of law for ordering the assassination of General Soleimani. Iran has chosen the legal path to bring him to justice, end quote. Source is CNN. So they're denying it. Obviously, if it were true, they would almost certainly deny it anyways. But the allegation doesn't really pass the sniff test. How the hell would they use some 20-year-old American? Now, according to the original report I read to you, they're not even alleging that they believe that he was in their task, that he was actually, being told to do so by the Iranians. They're just explaining that there's additional threats that are coming, which would, if there was another attack, God forbid, on President Trump, that this would be obviously the fall guy. The next go around will be Iran, and they're laying that groundwork now. So I want you to be very aware that if there is another attack on him, which I really hope there isn't, that's what they're going to do, almost certainly. But we also have graphical depiction over how close we came to complete bedlam in this country. And I think I'm underselling it, if anything. This is a graphic that tries to demonstrate where his head movement was as the shot came in, and it's absolutely bonkers. Watch this.
Take a look what happened. Take a look what happened.
So if you actually look at the beginning of this, assuming they're right, and this is just someone's probably guess based off of trajectory and different angles of the footage, but it looks like it would have entered essentially in his right temple, and it would have definitely been fatal. So that last little head motion to look back at that chart, in my opinion, 100% saved his life. And I'm just speechless. I'm speechless at how close we came to absolute catastrophe. And as you guys know, I don't say this because I have some undying love for Donald Trump or that I love government officials. I don't think that these people love or represent us by and large. But honestly, I would feel the same way about Biden. I do not want to see assassinations and political violence in this country become the norm again as they were in the 1960s. I think it, particularly in this particular climate of such division, it would be very dangerous for all of us and the world. So let's hope that these attempts on politicians' lives stop. I really do not want violence to become the norm again. Yes, I know violence has been the norm when it comes to our military abroad, but I'm saying domestically, I think this becomes very, very perilous for all of us. So I hope none of you are enjoying this escalation, because it's super dangerous. We've got Catherine Herridge, who says that new sources confirm joint FBI DHS intelligence bulletin. Let me pull it up so you can read along with me. Title: Assassination Attempt on Former U.S. President Donald J. Trump. Top line: Bulletin says attempted assassination, quote, reinforces our assessment that election-related targets are under a heightened threat of attack or other types of disruptive incidents, end quote. So basically, they're saying that it's not just Donald Trump that's in danger. Joe Biden and RFK Jr., I would guess, are also under heightened threat. Context: but near catastrophic lapses suggest the security posture did not reflect this, quote, heightened threat, end quote. Bulletin excerpts including Crook's movement before the attack and shipping history. On July 13th, prior to arriving at the campaign rally, Crooks purchased 50 rounds of ammunition from a gun and ammunition shop in Bethel Park, Pennsylvania. In a search subsequent to the shooting, the FBI found 3 suspected improvised explosive devices, 1 at Crooks' residence and 2 in Crooks' vehicle parked near the event. All 3 devices were rendered safe. Over the last several months, Crooks received multiple packages, including some marked as possibly containing hazardous material, according to a review of his shipping history. So that means he had been planning this for months, if this is true. Prior to the July 13th assassination attempt on former President of the United States, Donald Trump, we had observed disruptive tactics against targets related to the 2024 U.S. general election cycle, similar to the last two election cycles, including hoax, bomb threats, swatting, doxing, and white powder letters targeting election officials and offices. In many of these cases, the perpetrator and the perpetrator's motive remain unknown. However, these tactics very likely are intended to intimidate and disrupt election operations. Outlook. The FBI and DHS remain concerned about the potential for follow-on or retaliatory attacks of violence following this attack, particularly given that individuals in some online communities have threatened, encouraged, or referenced acts of violence in response to the attempted assassination. Lone actors or DVEs operating in small cells likely will continue to view publicly accessible locations like political rallies and campaign events as attractive targets. All right, that's the end of that report. So I just wanted to let you know why I think that we are not out of the danger zone here. Why I think that this is, as I said just a little bit ago, the most dangerous 3 to 4 month period that we will probably ever live through. Now, that doesn't mean that it will ultimately amount to danger for any of us. Hopefully it doesn't. But I think that the path is perilous. Like, we're going to walk a very fine line where we need a bunch of these politicians, most of which we don't like very much, but we need them all to be okay. Desperately, we need them all to be okay. So I really hope that that tempers cool and the rhetoric cools. That's the other thing that's been very frustrating over the past 72 hours is that had this same attack been made on, say, President Biden, the immediate response from the federal government would not be, oh, it's a lone actor. Oh, we're not sure of his political affiliation. We don't know. Nobody jump to conclusions. Everybody stay calm. We're not going to really do anything dramatic about it. If there was an attempt made on Biden's life, I think we all know that DHS and, basically the Patriot Act 2.0 would have already been rolled out, and we would already be facing a full loss of all of our civil liberties and probably the criminalization of the entire Trump movement. I really believe that. I think that's almost certainly what the response would have been. And you would not have had CNN pundits coming on the air saying, now's the time to turn down the rhetoric when it comes to political violence. They would be losing their mind and pointing the finger at everyone that didn't support openly Joe Biden. Everybody, including me, who didn't even vote for Trump. They would have been like, everybody who's not a Democrat is basically a threat to democracy, blah, blah, blah. And they would be the rhetoric would be insane. But instead, because it was an attack on Trump, it's the exact opposite. We got to turn down the temperature. Both sides have gotten out of control. Certainly it hasn't been our rhetoric as we've described Donald Trump for years and years as a fascist, tyrant, dictator, threat to democracy, Hitler, fascist, blah, 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 Christo nationalist. Every word, racist, bigot, rapist. Everything you could describe this guy as, they've described it like constantly. And you think it had no effect on your audiences? You think you don't bear any responsibility for the radicalization of your audiences? Now, I'll be very clear with you guys. Ultimate culpability lies on the gunman and anyone that assisted him. 100%. But I think we all would reflect on, say there was an attack made on Biden. We would go, all right, maybe we need to tone down the rhetoric here. As long as you're telling the truth, I think it's totally fair to continue to tell the truth. But I think the descriptors when it comes to Donald Trump have never fit who the actual man is. He has never demonstrated to me to be this racist, fascist, dictator, tyrant in waiting. They have always extrapolated little snippet quotes from him to try and portray him as that, when in reality he hasn't been that. That in fact, he left the White House. That he was this tyrant dictator who would never leave the White House. Who did? He did. So there's a lot of evidence to point out that, like, yeah, your claims about him have been bullshit. And yeah, you did radicalize your audience to the tune of millions of people. And they are totally out of their minds at this junction. But ultimately, culpability does still lie on the actor, the person who actually tries to perpetrate violence. Always. But it's just very frustrating, the tone with which they're talking about this, as if it's like, okay, now it's too far. Now we've said too many crazy things about Trump. When on the inverse of it, it would have been, you're all criminals and you're all going to jail and none of you are allowed to talk and your social media is going to be censored. And if you say anything out of line, we will absolutely send the FBI after you. Because that's what it would have been on the inverse. You know it. You know that's what it would have been.
Let me tell you something you already know. The world ain't all sunshine and rainbows. It's a very mean and nasty place, and I don't care how tough you are, it will beat you to your knees and keep you there permanently if you let it. You, me, or nobody is gonna hit as hard as life. But it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done.
Look, you don't have to be a Trump supporter to have that get you going. You put Rocky Balboa, you put Sly Stallone in the backdrop. It's not about how hard you get hit. It's about how hard you get back up and keep coming. This dude's the next president. I don't care how you feel about Donald Trump. I don't care if you hate the man. I don't care if you hate the Republicans. I don't care. He's going to win. Okay? I'm sorry. It's basically a foregone conclusion at this point, in my opinion. I don't see how he doesn't. As long as he gets to Election Day, he's getting to the White House. So that's where we're at. That's kind of the macro analysis. I know it's kind of even seems pointless to get into the macro analysis, but I think that Donald Trump will be the next president of the United States. I think that J.D. Vance, being his vice presidential selection, is the favorite to be the president in 2028, unless the bottom of the economy falls out during their term, which is a distinct possibility, in part because of the printing and spending that happened under Trump's first term. So it's not as if he won't be at all culpable if the bottom of the economy falls out during his second term, but I think that is pretty much inevitable at this point, that he will be in the White House again, and then it's up to the American people to see how they react and respond. And my concern, obviously, after you saw what happened in 2020, is that we will see mass rioting, that we could see cities burn again. And I hope that's not what happens, and I hope that, in fact, that was some sort of domestic color revolution, and, in fact, that's not what they want to have happen. I don't know, though. So when I said that the next 4 months are going to be the most perilous in American history, really, it's going to be the next couple years. We're in a really dangerous period. I hate to say that sentence because I feel like it's giving anxiety to you guys, and that makes me feel bad. But I'm just telling you my opinion as to what I think is obviously the truth. This is a super dangerous time, and we're going to need to look out for one another, look after ourselves, get our mental health in order, physically, everything else, diet, and just try and stay sane and be safe. And I hope we can. Goodness gracious. What a crazy time to be alive. The world is so nuts. It really is. Anyways, if you liked this episode, please do share it around. I'm sure a ton of people that are only watching corporate news that you know right now, if they were to watch this, the scales would fall from their eyes. They would be shocked as to the reality of what's transpired and the likely conclusion that they might come to. So I hope you'll do that. I think it's really important that people not be deceived any longer, and that they begin the process of critical thought and doing their own investigations to come to conclusions, as opposed to accepting the force-fed narratives that the corporate media gives to them, because they have been lied to consistently for years and years and years. And amazingly, millions and millions of Americans still don't even know that. How? I don't fucking know, but they don't. Hit the like button, subscribe, share it around. And if you want to support my work, you can subscribe to me on X at LibertyLockPod on X. I'll follow you back, or libertylockdown.locals.com. And as always, do leave a 5-star review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever else. I also have an Instagram account, Liberty Lockdown. I have not, I only post there, once or twice a week. But if you're on Instagram and you want to follow me there, I'd appreciate it. And last but not least, stay sane, look after yourselves, hug your kids, make more kids, start that business you've been wanting to. And I don't know, just be awesome. Peace.
Welcome to Liberty Lockdown. Please scan your barcode. Your liberty ain't gone, but yeah, it's on hold. Where did it come from and where did it go?